Today I show you how to rebuild the carbs on this 1975 Honda CB550 barn find. First thing you want to do is remove your tank and your seat so you can have access to your carbs. So now that we removed the gas tank and the seat, now we can focus on the carbs. Now I want to be very clear, in this video I won't be showing you how to remove the carbs, mainly because a lot of the components on this bike are missing. This is a true barn find. The gentleman that I bought this from was working on this bike at one point and misplaced a lot of the components. So I can't really show you how to remove components that are not there. However, I do want to make this video to show you how to rebuild carburetors because I feel that I use some techniques that might be beneficial to some of you out there. Specifically, how to remove stuck slides. There's really no videos out there showing you how to use or how to remove stuck slides in the way that I do it, which I feel is the easiest way to do it. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how to rebuild these carbs. I'm gonna show you how to remove any stuck slides if we have any, and I'll show you how to put everything back together. Now, this is a long process. I'm going to try to make this and condense this to a simple video that you can see and it won't take an hour to view. But let's see how it goes. So let's take these carbs off, put them on the bench, start working on them. One of the most important steps that we can do to ensure our carb rebuild process goes smoothly is to add penetrating oil to our carburetor stack. Now you want to make sure that you do that because this is going to make our rebuild process go a lot smoother. We want to make sure that we can remove all the fasteners, all of the nuts and bolts off of the carburetors in an easy way. Now to do that, what I like to do is I like to coat all of the bolts in penetrating oil overnight. You don't just want to do it for 30 minutes or an hour. You want to make sure that you plan ahead and you take your carburetors off and coat them in penetrating oil. I cannot stress enough how important that process is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add this carburetor stack to my tray here. I'm going to add penetrating oil to all of the components to ensure that I get even coverage. And then we'll come back the next day and start disassembly on this carburetor stack. Okay, so we have our stack of carburetors here. Now, I'm gonna start removing all the components around the carburetors. As you can see, I have the intake boots and the manifold here, which some people don't remove this for the motorcycle. I think it's easier to remove the carburetors like that. So I'm gonna remove the boots. I'm gonna remove these, I guess they're breather hoses. To do that, I'm just going to start there. They have some little clips here. As you can see, these are already coming off. They're a little bit brittle. Okay. So I have my carburetors here on this piece of foam because it has a little bit more grip and that way I don't mess up my plastic table. So we're gonna remove these two vacuum. I guess they're not vacuum. They're more of a breather line that goes up here. Now we got those out of the way, then we can start kind of tearing these apart. Now, one of the things I will suggest that you do is that you purchase a good set of GIS screwdrivers. Now these GIS screwdrivers, as you can see here, these are Vessel. I have a set that I purchased. If you're going to be working on Honda motorcycles and you're going to be really messing with them, and you know that you're going to use them in the future, I would suggest you get a set of these screwdrivers. Otherwise, you might run into some issues when you're trying to remove some of these soft fasteners. So in this case, as you can see, this is on there. So I'm gonna try to heat up these. Rubber boots. Okay, we got those two out. All right, so now we're gonna have these two screws here that go to the petcock. The petcock came with the carburetor stack. I didn't remove it, it was already removed on the bike, so we can just go ahead and remove this. Now, I do wanna take note, you do wanna check how the lines are ran through here. That's gonna make it a lot easier for you when you go back to putting the lines back in. I guess you can call this bracket here. It's held in place, it's holding all the carburetors together. But you will have to remove this to get to the carburetors. So just remove these bolts here. Now you want to remove only the bolts that you need to remove. There are going to be some, for example, like these right here that go to your idle adjuster here. You don't want to remove these if you don't have to. If you want to clean them, you can, but if you want to leave them on the actual bracket itself, then I would suggest that's fine. Now there's also this bracket here, which is rusted. Now I could remove it and I could try to clean it and remove all the components from here. But again, if you don't need to, all I would suggest that you do, which is what I'm gonna do, is just kind of sand it off a little bit. Make sure you remove all the surface rust from here, all these components. These bolts, you might need to remove them. If we need to, then we'll remove them. Otherwise, if we don't need to, then we can just leave this whole mechanism in place. So I'll show you here how that's gonna look. But for now, I'm gonna start removing the petcock from this. Okay, so next thing we wanna do is we wanna remove this. Again, GIS screw. Try to use GIS screwdrivers if you have them. Now, again, we could bend this bracket to try to remove that, but now, if I can help it, if you take something off and you can put it back and it's not gonna keep you from removing anything else, I would suggest you just put it back and tighten it up how you found it. Okay, so now we have these bolts here that we can remove to kind of free up all the carbs so it can be individually, because right now they're being held together by that bracket. But before we do that, so these carbs have these mechanisms here that are basically holding the carbs together. So in order to remove them or break them apart, we need to remove that first. So let me start by removing this spring right here. So this is the return spring. So whenever you rev up, yeah, so we might have some stuck valves, which is okay because I want to show you how to remove those stuck slides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to remove this spring first. We're just going to pull it up like that, and then it should be held in place at the bottom. Yeah, we can just leave it there for now. So that's removed. Like I said before, these right here are adjusters for what you'll see. There's, I would call it like a ball bearing inside of these. There's kind of like a pivot arm there that has kind of like a Heim joint. It has a circle there that has two surfaces that kind of rub up against it, and they kind of, you know, act as adjusters. So we have to remove these first, and then we can get to the adjustment part. But without removing these, there's really no way of you separating the carburetor. So that's the first step that we need to do. Now I'm trying to remove some of these fasteners. I noticed that they're kind of stuck. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to try to heat them up just a little bit first, because I don't want to damage any of these components here. Now just keep in mind there is some rubber pieces in here that original carbs have. You don't necessarily need these. It's just to kind of create some cushion between these parts here. So I don't want to burn those off, so I'm just going to try to heat up the top portion of this. Now put the screwdriver in here, just a flathead screwdriver. The reason I want to do that is because if you don't put one in there, your, I don't know what you call these, but the arm that sits in there, and I'll show you here, it might be hot, so let me not touch. When you're removing these, a little spring is going to fall out. So when you're removing these, if you try to kind of undo them like this is a 13 millimeter, by the way. If you try to do this, there's some flex in these components. And if you don't put anything to kind of hold a component from turning, especially this little mechanism here, then what's gonna happen is you're going to potentially cause that little ball bearing I was talking about to come out of that component or break off. You don't want to do that. So always kind of hold it in place so you can remove it. So I'm going to apply a little bit of heat to the next one, and that way we can start removing that one as well without trying to burn anything here. Okay, so we've removed these components here. Now before we kind of go any further, I have a little tray like this. You can get these at Harbor Freight, and it kind of helps you to organize your carburetor parts. They don't need to be in any specific order. You just have to ensure that you have one of each for every carburetor. If you can, try to keep them, you know, where you maybe mark the carburetor so you know where you took them off. I wouldn't say you have to do that, but it's something you can do. Now, once you do that, once you remove that, you have the springs and the caps that go here. I want to show you there's a small little part inside that comes out, and it looks like this. Now, this component here is a little part that there's a kind of like an area here for, you know, if you imagine like a ball bearing to kind of sit here, but it's actually not a ball bearing, it's this arm right here. Inside of this arm, there's that arm has like a little ball where this rides on top, and then there will be another one of these at the bottom. So it'll be kind of squishing this arm together. So every one of these has one of these little arms or whatever you want to call this. It has one of these inside. So make sure you remove that. Make sure you remove those. So you can see, you just get a magnet, they come right out. Okay, so now that we have that, now we also have to remove these components here. Now, right here, as you can tell, these are kind of rusty. So I want to add some lubricant. Again, I had them soaking in lubricant all night last night, but I don't want to take any chances. So I'm going to try to add more lubricant because I don't want those to break off. So let me get a ratchet to remove these. And once we remove these, then this arm, we should be able to kind of free these and move them apart from each other. And that'll allow us to kind of start separating all the carburetors. Okay, great. We don't have any issues with those, even though they look pretty rusty. These are 8mm sockets. Just trying to look for a longer socket. I know I had one, but couldn't find one. Okay, so now that we remove these nuts, you could potentially just put a flathead screwdriver in here and just start removing these. Now we're gonna have to remove them anyways, so you could try to put a wrench in here and try to remove the nut first and then the screw, but I'd rather do that outside of the carburetors. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to remove these screws together so that I can show you what's in there, and also so that I can do all my cleaning. I like to usually, I like to use my ultrasonic cleaner with all of these bolts. And so that does the clean, that, you know, helps clean everything up a lot nicer. So these are the components that are gonna come out of there. They have surface rust, but as you can see, they're pretty clean in here. Same thing as the other ones. And I'm gonna show you how that works. These have like a little concave little section in the middle. I hope you can see that. They have a concave section here in the middle. And those are the same thing, same parts as the ones that we pulled out on the other side of the other components, as you can see, like that. And the reason for that is because those are the ones that ride on these arms. Again, I'll show you how those arms look. It's like a little ball where you have two of them kind of riding there. So, okay, so now we've freed up those components. As you can see, we can kind of wiggle these, you know, all apart a little bit, and we'll try to do the same thing for these. Don't be afraid to do this. I know some people might look at rusty carbs like this and might say, no, you know what, those are no good. But just as like we're seeing here, these carbs are only rusty from the outside. As you can see, the components inside look fairly clean. I don't know that'll be the case for the float, you know, bowls and all of that, but we'll see. Okay, so now we remove those. There's a little plastic in here. Some people just remove that little plastic. I've removed it. I've left it in there if I have it. So if you have it and you want to put it back, try to be gentle with this, and that way you can, you know, use these again. Okay, so we removed those components. We want to put those off to the side. I like to remove them together. Now, we're gonna kind of inspect these and ensure that, yep, everything looks fairly well. Let's make sure that we're not forgetting anything. You don't have to remove these bolts. This is part of the adjustment for this bracket that kind of holds the, the carb bracket together. Now we do have some fuel lines right here in the middle. Those fuel lines are going to be kind of holding the carbs together. You can cut those, but they usually come out once you start removing the bolts. So I'm going to just add a little bit more lubricant to these bolts. I'm gonna leave them sitting there for a little bit, and I'm gonna get a hammer. Okay, so these bolts, they should be fairly easy to come out. You wanna use your biggest GIS that comes in the kit. Mine, this is the one. I find that if you tap it and turn it, usually that works, but as you can see here, this one, since we left it kind of penetrating all night, it's pretty easy to remove. Wow, these are actually pretty loose. Interesting. Okay, so we won't have to, that's awesome. We won't have to tap them to remove them. Wow, this is awesome. That's pretty cool. I have never, well, I won't say never, but those actually came out pretty nice. That is great. And see, this is what I like to, this is the reason why I like to leave the carburetors kind of soaking overnight, because once that penetrating oil goes in there, I mean, everything just comes out a lot better. If you just start doing everything dry, that's where you can run into issues, and you don't want that, especially when you're trying to rebuild a carburetor stack. Okay, so that bracket or assembly is loose now. Just gently try to pry it up. Make sure it's not hung up on anything. Now again, this bracket is going to be attached to this section here. So it might not let you remove it. So you kind of have to wiggle it around until it comes out. So notice how these components are moving. And I think that the reason that that's happening is because these slides might be stuck on this side. So I'm not try to keep prying here. So you can see one of the components that I was talking about already fell off. That's fine, that's what we want. Try to remove it. This is the one that, I'll show you how these work here in a bit. But just try to wiggle that. Okay, let's see, maybe the fuel line is getting in the way. Okay, so see, notice how I push this aside to kind of get it out of the way. And then we also have these rubber gaskets, or these rubber little components here. You see that one's pretty brittle. So yeah, that's really hard. I don't think that that's gonna come out. They're designed to go over these little ball bearings here, but this one is super brittle, so that might not come out. Yeah, those are not gonna come out. They're just super brittle and super hard. Yeah, see, that one broke as I was trying to take it out. So we won't worry about those. You don't necessarily need them, so you could add, if you wanted to, a rubber washer in place of those, but again, you don't have to. So now that we remove those out of this component here, then technically, I mean, these components should be free. Let's try to remove them. Now we'll do the same for the other side. So we remove that, move it out of the way, and then we move the other one, move it out of the way. Remove your rubber little gaskets there. Okay, And now this component, which is your kind of like holder that holds all the carburetors in place, can come out. I'm just gonna cut this fuel line. I'm gonna be replacing all the fuel lines, so don't have to worry about that. We push the fuel lines through, move that through. And as you can see, we've removed this. This is kind of like your throttle mechanism. So whenever you kind of you move your throttle, this is what pushes or kind of pulls the slides up so that you can get air and you can get, you know, your gas. This is the adjustment for your idle. So you can kind of screw this in if you want your idle to be a little higher. And of course it has a stop here, so you know how to adjust it. So this is just a bracket that goes and kind of holds all the carburetors together. We'll go ahead and put that off to the side and we'll clean that here shortly. All right, so now I'm gonna move this over to the side. So now, like I mentioned before, you have these little parts that we need to remove. You gotta be careful with these because there is a little component inside of here that has a, hopefully I can, here we go. It has another one of those little arms or whatever you want to call this. We'll call them golf pins, right? And so these golf pins go into this spring and they go in there. They have to go in there first before you put them on these little arms here, because the arm will go in here and kind of ride in there. And then the other one we took off goes on the other side, and then it's pressed down with those adjustments. So in essence, it's kind of holding that little ball bearing in place. So that way you can adjust it and adjust how high or how low they need to be, so you can adjust your carburetor. So that's where you kind of go to do your syncing and all of that. For now, we're just gonna put it in there, back in there again, make sure they stay in there, and we'll put it off to the side where we're putting our carburetor components. Now, one important parts you don't want to lose is this little part right here. It doesn't really do anything, it just kind of lines up the carburetors together. But it's very important because this part right here is the one that will hold your spring in place. It'll just kind of sit like that. And that will ensure that we can get that return on that spring. So you want to make sure that you keep that and don't lose that. Okay, again, don't be afraid to do any of this stuff. If you happen to lose a component, I mean, you can, if you're lucky, you can find it on eBay. They sell carburetor stacks fairly cheap sometimes that, you know, need a rebuild. So you can go online, purchase some if you have the means to do so. But yeah, don't be too afraid of working on these. So we got one carburetor off to the side. Notice how I haven't removed any components from the inside, and I'll explain why. So we have the other carburetor. We still have a little bit of rubber parts here. These small little kind of, if anybody knows where to get these small little hose clamps, let me know. I think they're like for 3/16 line. I can't find any that are that small. I want to, because those are the original ones that go on these carbs. And it'd be kind of cool to, you know, put the original ones in here. Okay, so this one, we removed everything. Okay, put that off to the side. This one too, all the rubber is off. This one needs to be removed. Okay, we got that out of the way. Okay, that rubber component is off. Just trash all over the place. Bring my trash can to put all this trash. Okay, so the same thing with these. We're just gonna cut the middle fuel line that's there. So you can see I just cut the middle fuel line so I can separate them, and then just start wiggling. Now as you're taking them apart, notice that the chokes, these butterflies, I guess you can call them, or throttle butterflies, these are actually not for your carburetors. These are for your choke. So when you want to choke the carbs, you kind of just, they have, this last carburetor has this little lever. So when you open the flies, that's just regular. If you move it up, that's the choke position. But notice that all of these tie together. So they have an adjustment here. If you don't need to adjust these, don't adjust them. All you're doing here by removing these bolts here is that you're kind of moving how much you want each carburetor to kind of open or close. You don't have to mess with that because obviously when you want to choke the carburetors, you want to have all the blades the same. So if they're all the same, when you took them off, just leave them like that. So yeah, that's what these little throttle butterflies are for. Now, keep in mind, the actual air or letting the air into the carb is done by the slides that are in here. So as the slides go up, when you hit the throttle, the slide will go up and that'll let the air in. These, whenever you're riding around, well, after you warm up your motorcycle, if you first turned it on, these little butterflies, they're gonna stay in the open position. So, I mean, they're really not doing anything at that point. Okay, so now that we explained that, we can notice how much dirt is in these. Yeah, it's pretty bad, but don't worry, we're gonna clean all of these. Remove the fuel line. Notice how this little T has a hole in there. You have holes that go in there. Now, these T's, you're gonna find them in between two stacks, and then the other T between the other two stacks. So when you're putting the carburetors back together, just remember that those are the T's that go into these holes. If you look at this hole over here, it won't have anything. So a quick way to know how they go together is, you have a T here. You don't have anything on this side, so you know that your fuel line has to come through here, through the middle. Now, when it comes to figuring out what carbs go on what side, you know that the carb that has the choke lever, this one goes on the outer portion of the, I guess you can call it driver's side of the motorcycle, which is the left side. Kind of like if you're getting into a car or into a truck, the left side will be where your choke is. So if you start there, then you know that your T has to go here, so you have to find another carburetor where the T can go here, because this one on this side doesn't have anything here. Not only that, but you'll be able to kind of tell by just looking at them, because these two little, I guess you can call breather tubes here, those two little breather tubes are actually connected to each other here, connected over here, but these breather tubes, they sit right in the middle. So you want to make sure that you do it like that, and that's how you figure out the configuration of these carbs. It's pretty simple, but you just have to pay attention to those little things. Okay, so now that we've removed all the components from the carburetors, oh, actually, no, we haven't. Okay, so let me put those aside. Okay, so now we got to remove all of these rubber components here. Remove that, remove that, remove that. Gotta remove that. See, they're supposed to come out this easy so you can put them back in, but these are brittle, so sometimes they break like that. All right, so now we go back. Okay, notice how if you move these right here, these are the ones that are connected to our arm for the throttle, right? So if you move these up and down, you'll be able to see the slide. Hopefully y'all can see that. You'll be able to see the slide moving up and down in there. That's a good sign. That means that our slide is free. So if we come back to the next one, you move it up and down. If you can see the slide here, that's perfect, that's good. Same thing on the other ones, they're all free. This one is not. Okay, so I wanna show you how to remove this one. So this one has a stuck slide. A lot of people, what they do is they start to put a screwdriver in here, or they try to put a screwdriver on the other side and kind of pry it up and get this free. Don't do that. I'm gonna show you how to do it here in a bit. But before we do that, let me clean up a little bit, and then that way we can start getting these carburetors disassembled, because we still need to do a lot of disassembly to these carburetors. So let me just get organized here and we'll start on that. Okay, so we have our carburetors on the bench. One of the things I want to point out is that these carbs aren't clean at all. I just kind of went through them and kind of knocked off, you know, the biggest amount of dirt I could from them, but they are not clean. Our next step here is to remove the float bowls, to remove the covers that hold down, or these are actually covers for your slides, so you can take out the slides, and I'll show you how to do that here in a bit. But yeah, so let's start working on them, and let's do it one by one. So the way I'm gonna show you first is I'm gonna show you by removing the carb slide covers. Now these have 2 bolts, as you can see here. These 2 bolts are kind of rusted, so you wanna make sure that you can apply a little bit of lubricant. Even though we left them kind of soaking overnight, we still want to make sure that we applied a little bit, or we apply a little bit of lubricant. Now, these bolts are rusted. There's surface rust. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're rusted in here. What makes this job sometimes hard is that this one is actually the slide that is frozen. But what makes this hard sometimes is the fact that these bolts are metal bolts that go into an aluminum housing, as you can see here. So if you're having a hard time removing these, what I suggest you do is you heat up this aluminum just a little bit, not too much, just a little bit, so that you can try to remove that. That'll sometimes expand the metal, and that'll allow you to remove that. So what I'm gonna do here now is I'm gonna try my GIS screwdriver. Now I have 2 screwdrivers here, as you can see. These are GIS, they are Vessel brand. I love these, but as you can tell, you can even tell from what they say here, there are different measurements. There are different kind of like sizes. So what I like to do is I like to find the one that fits these bolts correctly or better. And once I'm comfortable with which one fits better, then I'll use that one. So in this case, that bolt came out just fine. This one came out, let me see. Yeah, we got lucky there. So these came out fine. Now, this one has a stuck slide, so I'm actually gonna leave this one towards the end, and I'm gonna do one that doesn't have the slide stuck. So, just give that a minute. Okay, that one came out, no problem. One of the things I do also want to point out is sometimes these bolts will have dirt inside of them. You don't want to remove them when there's dirt inside of them, or like in the cross area. What you want to do is you want to grab a toothbrush or something, a little brush that you have laying around, and kind of clean that off. Get all the dirt. If you need to use a pick to get all that dirt out. Because what's going to happen is that your screwdriver is not going to go all the way in. You're not going to be able to remove that bolt. It might cross thread, so you don't want that. You don't want any issues with that. Okay, so we're going to remove these covers here. I hope that y'all can see this, what I'm doing here. Okay, we're going to put that off to the side. Okay, so as you can see, our slide is going up and down. On this one, that's, for me, that I would consider that a win, because it's moving. We're going to be able to remove these, no problem. Now, there are 2 bolts here. Now, these 2 bolts, If you're wondering which one should I remove, well, it really depends on which ones you have to remove. I don't suggest that you remove this one unless you absolutely need to clean this one. But the one that I would suggest you remove is this one right here. And I'll kind of show you why I believe that that's the one that you have to remove. But before you remove it, before we remove this mechanism here, we have to undo this little tab here. So what I do is I just get a small screwdriver. Sometimes that works. Okay, as you can see here, I bent back the tab here, and now we just need to remove this bolt. Okay, here we go. Okay, so as you can see here, we have the bolt removed. This is a 7mm bolt. We can remove this bolt right here. And it has a little pressure washer there. We're going to remove that. We have a bolt, we have a pressure washer, and then we have this little tab that bends back. We're going to put that off to the side. And as you can see now, this mechanism here does not move the slide anymore. That's because the bolt is the one that's actually holding that shaft together so that it could move the slide up and down. Now what we can do is we can remove this arm here. Now we want to remove this arm, but we want to be very careful, and we want to keep all of these components aligned correctly. So as you can see, we have the arm. We have a little washer that kind of holds this spring together. We have a plastic washer here, and then we remove that all the way. Now, this little felt washer is part of these components. So you want to be very careful and keep this felt washer because this felt washer will have to go back in there. It kind of keeps everything from, sticking to the metal. So unless you really need to clean these, I would suggest just try to clean them as best as you can. Maybe paint them if you have to, just kind of sand this part off, but always keep these components together. So what I like to do is I like to take the bolt and then put it back on this shaft so that everything stays in place, just like that. Okay, once we have that on there, we're gonna put it off to the side. Okay, the next thing we do is we wanna make sure that we look in here because there is a little, and it just fell inside, but there's a little plastic ring. Now this plastic ring, we could have left it inside of the shaft, but then we might get a little confused as to whether or not it goes inside or on the outside portion of it. So this one, what I would suggest you do is just put it on this shaft, but just make sure you put it on this side so you know it goes on the inside portion of the carburetor, or on the inside portion of this. Okay, so now we can remove this slide. Okay, so here we go. We have the slide here. Now this is your needle here, your slide for the needle. We are going to be replacing this slide or this needle, so we will have to remove the two bolts that are in here. But for now, since we're going to do a lot of cleaning and we're going to try to get everything like the slide clean, this component clean, which doesn't really need a lot of cleaning in this case, but I would suggest just leave it like that. We can put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, we can clean it up a bit, and then we can start our part replacement. Okay, so we've done that. Now your carburetor should look sort of like this. It doesn't have anything in here. There's no more components to remove. We can check in here and make sure that we removed all the components. Just kind of visually inspect. It has like a little bit, I wouldn't call that a bearing, but yeah, I guess you can call it a small bearing. Just check, make sure there's no debris in there or anything out of, you know, the ordinary. Okay, so now that we've removed that, we can move over to removing our float bowl. Now this is where it can get pretty interesting. I forgot to take this off earlier. There we go. Okay, so this is where it can get a little interesting. So you want to, again, apply a little bit of penetrating fluid before you remove these bolts. Just leave them sitting. I know we left the carbs sitting overnight, so I mean, the penetrating oil should have gone into those crevices where the bolts are, but you know, I like to put a little bit of penetrating oil just to make sure that we can get those bolts out. Again, we got to use our GIS screws or GIS screwdrivers. So I'm gonna, again, there's a long one like this. There's a even longer one that are the Phillips, and then there's a smaller one. In this case, I'm going to use the smaller one. Just gotta make sure to clean the tip off, make sure there's no dirt that's gonna get into those crevices here. Just kind of visually inspect them, and then let's go in there and try to remove them. Now, you wanna press down on them as much as possible, straight down, and then try to undo them. Oh, perfect. These are actually, well, let me see. Yep. Perfect. Okay, so you see, this is why we add penetrating oil the night before. Perfect. Yeah, no issues with these. They don't look to be touched at all, which is surprising. A lot of people, when they're trying to fix motorcycles or trying to get them back working, the first thing that they'll remove is the float bowls to try to see if there's any debris in there. And usually they try to do it on the bike, and what will happen is that they'll end up kind of cross-threading the bolts, not knowing that they're GIS screws to begin with. Okay, so we got those removed. Later on we're going to remove this one, but for now let's just kind of look at what's in here. Now those can be on there a little bit, so we can grab a soft mallet, just kind of hit them a little bit. Okay, that doesn't work. There looks to be sealant here, so maybe somebody did get into here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna very carefully gonna use one of my screwdrivers to kind of pry that open. There we go. All right, so these carbs, they look pretty bad, as you can see, but they're not terrible. Now, what we're looking for here, well, the first thing that we're looking for is how are the floats? Are they stuck? And in this case, yeah, they're very, very stuck on there. So we're gonna have a hard time here, but that's okay. The next thing we want to look at is we want to look at the float bowl. As you can see, there is sediment at the bottom. Hopefully y'all can see that. There's sediment here. I'm gonna try to undo all of that. This is all gunk from old fuel. And of course, if you use regular fuel and you don't use non-ethanol fuel, and that's what you're gonna get. Sometimes even with non-ethanol fuel, you'll get some of that gunky stuff. But yeah, that should clean right up. Before we throw it in the parts washer, we want to before we throw in the parts washer, we want to just kind of scrape all of this stuff out, the big stuff, to try to get as much as possible out. That way the ultrasonic cleaner doesn't have to do too much work, and get that all cleaned out. Okay, so in the flow bowl, the last thing we want to do here before we get it ready for cleaning is we want to remove this bolt. With the GIS set of screwdrivers, you get this green one. This is an 8x150. That's what it says on here. I'm not sure if they all say the same thing. Well, that's what it says, 8x150. So I found that these fit in these screws very well, and then that way you can remove them. See, this one is stuck on there, so you gotta be careful when removing these. Yep, nope, they're not gonna come out. So I'm gonna heat this up and see if I can get it out. Now be careful because these bolts had, you know, there's fuel inside them. Even though it's old fuel, you just gotta be careful. Okay, so I felt it starting to get warm on my hand. That means it's pretty much warm. All right, I'm gonna try to go in here now and try to remove it. Let's see if it comes out. There we go, perfect. As you can see, a little bit of heat does all the difference. Okay, that's still hot, so I'm just going to take that. Now, a lot of people don't think that there's any reason for these bolts, but there actually is. These are actually kind of like banjo bolts. They have a little hole in the middle. You want to make sure that they're clean, because let me see if I can show you here. These bolts, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show you, but these bolts have an entrance here on the side. They have a little hole in the middle. So what happens is when you're trying to open your flow bolts to empty them when it's time to winterize your bike, if that's, you know, even a thing, when it's time for you to empty out the bolts, you won't have to unscrew them all the way. What will happen is that you'll just open them up a little bit, and then you'll be able to let the gas out and then put them back on, put them back in. That way you don't lose these screws. So that's one of the reasons why they have those holes there. Okay, so we removed that. So now we're going to take our screws for these, I'm just gonna put this back just so I don't lose it. But once I put it in the parts washer, I'll remove it. We're gonna take the bolts for the float bowl. We're gonna put those aside. Okay, and now we arrive at our carburetor, our actual, you know, carburetor and our float assembly here. Now, one of the easiest things to remove here is your main jet. Now, this main jet here, all you're gonna do is you're gonna kind of wiggle this out. This is just a holder that keeps that main jet in place. Okay, you're gonna put that off to the side. Now this main jet, you're gonna try to see if you can remove it. Again, this main jet, you're going to actually replace this, so you don't have to be so careful with it. You just have to make sure it doesn't break or stay in there. But these are just pressure fitted into this housing here. So they're in good condition. Now, sometimes carburetors, the housing here will be worn out. In this case, it's actually not that bad, but if it was worn out, you gotta be careful, because if it's too far gone, then you're gonna have a hole there, and that might introduce air, or it can leak fuel. So you're gonna have issues there. I didn't soak these overnight in here. You could have added, I could have added lubricating oil into these passages overnight. I have in the past, but that takes up a lot of penetrating oil. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some penetrating oil right now here to this section to try to get that removed. I'm going to show you a way that I use to remove these carburetor slides from here, or these float slides, which is, it's really just a piece of, I think sometimes they're metal and sometimes they're copper, but I want to show you a quick way to remove these without having to damage these. Now, sometimes these are stuck in there. They're really hard to get out. Some people use punches to try to get them out. Other people use other methods. I personally would take this before I start doing anything to it and put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, just to kind of get all that gunk and surface grime out of there, and then come back and work on it. But I'm gonna see if I can get this going before we do that. Okay, so this right here was the main jet. This is our pilot jet. So I'm gonna remove the pilot jet. When you're trying to remove the pilot jet, just make sure you get the appropriate size screwdriver in there. There are some that are thinner than others. This vessel one, the small one, is the perfect size to go in here. Again, try to remove it. If it doesn't want to come off, just try to apply some heat to it. In this case, I can feel it moving a little bit, and yeah, I feel it coming out. So that's perfect. Okay, so we remove the pilot jet. We're gonna put that off to the side. And now we remove the main jet, the pilot jet, and now we have to remove the needle and seat from here. There's a screw here, but before we do that, we need to remove this float assembly. And as you can see, it's stuck on there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use a tool that I'll show you here in a bit that I've never seen anybody use before, but I use it and it has great results. So let me show you that. Okay, so here we have it. This tool is something that people don't use. This right here is a watch link remover, and I use this for my carburetor floats, to remove the floats. Now, this is a tool that when I saw that they were using it for watch links, I automatically said, you know what, that it will work for these float, to remove the float pins from there. So what you want to do is you want to find the side that is sticking out the most, and in this case is this side over here, and you want to put this side of the tool there, right in the middle. And then this side, all you're going to do, you have to ensure that that one is in the middle of that slot there. And what you do is you bring this one and you start to put it in here into that slide. Okay, just try to get it in there as best as you can. It might take you a little bit. Okay, right? Again, these are old carbs, so you gotta take your time, because last thing you want to do is you want to damage something and have to buy some more parts online or something like that. You just want to take your time. Now you want to do this with your float bowls or your floats on, because this metal here will keep these two from collapsing on each other if you're trying to apply pressure. So obviously in this case we can't get the floats out, so they're always going to be in there. But if you're doing it when they're not in there for whatever reason, you want to make sure that that you don't do that, because then you might collapse these, and these are made out of aluminum, so you got to be really careful. Try to apply some penetrating oil and just kind of work these back and forth. Okay, so as you can see now we have movement on the other side. Again, this is a slow process, but I rather do it this way because I'm kind of, you're not just hitting stuff and breaking stuff, but you know, it's a process that will eventually get you the results. Once you see the pin is moving from side to side, then you know it's free and you can kind of come back. Just gotta make sure it's in the middle, because otherwise it's not gonna move. Okay. All right, so here we go. So now that we know that it's moving, the watch kit comes with this watch link remover comes with these little tools inside of them. Now the first one is kind of thin, and I usually bend these. So again, this is $4, so it's a good idea to buy one and just have one when you're gonna rebuild a carburetor kit. So just order one every time if you have the means to do it. What I do is I just cut the small end, which is the very thin end, and what I do is I just use the thicker area and I put it in here. Once I see that the slide starts moving, then I know it's pretty much free. So as you can see, now I'll use that. Still gotta cut a little piece because there's still a small piece in there from the thin side. Okay, so now it should look like this. And now, since I have the slide kind of out a little bit, now I can come back and use this pin to try to push it in the rest of the way. Okay, and again, if the piece that you're working with is too small, I just use some of these nails that come in these little clips. I'm not too sure what type they are, but I use those and I just remove this and I put a new bolt in this little attachment that this tool comes with. Again, this tool, I feel that like this tool is actually better for doing this because it allows you to do it in a more precise way than if you start to hit stuff and if you start to kind of try to get stuff out of there. Sometimes it's just, to me, it's just not as effective because you can break a carb very quickly and then that's a bad day. So in this case, I'm just gonna take my tool, I'm gonna cut the piece that I need. In this case, I'm gonna make it to about that big. I'm gonna set my tool again here. I'm gonna start to unscrew it all the way. Hopefully I have enough. Here we go. And then I'm just gonna keep pushing the slide out. Now we can take out our tool. Take out our bolt. As you can see, our floats are now free. Without having to bang anything, without running the risk of damaging these components here. Now all I'm gonna do is just gonna pinch it once again and try to remove my slide from here. And there we go. Now one of the things I want to show you here in this example, these floats come with an inner sleeve, and that's the inner sleeve that gets really lodged into your slides. So that's what makes these slides so difficult to remove, especially when a carb is in this condition. So I hope that tips helps, you know, some of you all out there that are having a hard time removing those slides. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we just remove our needle and seat. We're just going to remove this bolt from here. Again, this bolt, we're going to use it again, so you don't want to lose this little clip here. I'm going to put that aside. Then you can use a pair of needle nose pliers to remove the needle. And then now you want to just remove the seat. Now again, just wiggle it back and forth. You don't want to break this. If you need to, apply a little bit of penetrating fluid and just put your needle nose pliers, try to wiggle it. In my case, it's not wiggling, so I'm not going to chance it. I'm actually going to heat it up a little bit. Okay. Just be careful if you're working around gas because, I mean, gas is flammable and it can blow up stuff. So now that we got it heated up a little bit, now I'm gonna go back, try to remove it. As you can see, easy peasy, comes out really easily. And now we have a carb that is ready to be thrown into our cleaner. Now I use an ultrasonic cleaner, but you don't have to. You can just use carburetor cleaner and clean all of this out. Take your time, go through all the passages, make sure all of these ports are nice and clean. And a lot of people ask me, do I have to remove these butterflies? Now these butterflies are for your choke, so you don't have to remove them if they're not stuck. If you want to remove them, you can, but you really don't have to. Now, if they're stuck on there and you feel like they're gonna get stuck later, you're gonna know right away because your choke is not gonna work. So when you try to go and use your choke, it's gonna get stuck. You're gonna know that that's your issue. But in this case, our choke worked fine. So we're gonna leave it alone. We're just gonna put it into our parts washer and try to get that going and get them cleaned. Now it's time to remove the idle screw and the main jet needle seat. To remove your idle screw, all you have to do is locate your idle screw in the carb. As you can see, it's a flathead screwdriver screw. All you have to do is remove the screw. Once you remove it, you're going to notice that sometimes there's a spring that comes out. If it doesn't come out, that means the spring is in your bore. So you get a magnet and you pull it out. That's the spring that comes out with it. It's supposed to go like this. Put that off to the side. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to remove the main jet needle seat. So this is a long tube that goes inside of this bore here. Now it comes with our kit, so we have to remove it. So the way I remove it is I have an old Phillips screwdriver that I grounded the front to, and I made it into what you might call a pick, or a, yeah, I guess you can call it a pick. So what I do is I put it into the bore here where the slide goes. I put it in there, make sure it's in the circle of the jet seat, or the needle seat, and then I just tap it out. As you can see, once we tap it out, it comes out on this side, and it's a tube that simply comes out like that. Now, keep in mind, I like to keep these in the same orientation that they come out. So as you can see, they have a bunch of little holes here, which is like 6 little holes. And on the other side, they have 6 holes. So these are facing each end of the intake and exhaust, I guess you can call it, of the carb. So I always like to keep this in the same orientation. So don't twist it and put it sideways. I don't know if there's any difference, but you always want to make sure that they're in the same orientation as you took it out. So this is where the main jet sits here, and then this is what goes up into your slide passage, or this passage here of the carburetor. And as you can see, the screwdriver that I used kind of just goes in here. It's about the same size as that opening, and I just tap it on this side, and that's what makes it come out. And my screwdriver is actually the same size as that bore, so I know that if I tap it, it'll be able to come out the other end if I needed to. It's not going to get stuck in that bore. So that's the way I remove these main jet needle seats. It's very important. All right. Okay, so in the other carburetor that we took apart, I showed you how to remove this piece and how to remove this piece right here, which is your slide. This slide right here. Now, this is a carburetor that has a stuck slide. So what I wanted to show you now is how to remove that stuck slide. Now, as you can see here, this is a slide and this is how it looks. But inside of this slide, there are 2 bolts in here, 2 small bolts. Hopefully you can see them right there. And I'll do a close-up so you can see these. But these bolts, what they do is they hold this piece together to the slide. So what we're gonna do on this one that has a stuck slide is, I already took them out, but there are 2 bolts in here. You would just put your screwdriver in there and just undo these 2 bolts. Once you undo them, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna remove this mechanism from the slide. The stuck slide is going to stay in there. So what I like to do to remove the stuck slide is I have a slide hammer. Okay, so this is a Harbor Freight slide hammer, and it comes with all of these tools right here. But the one I like to use, you could potentially use this one to kind of pull on this mechanism, but this is aluminum, so you might damage that. So in order to pull the slide out, what I did is I sacrificed one of the metal parts that goes inside of one of these mechanisms. It's a metal part that has the 2 holes for the slide to hold on to, which is just like the one we removed. It's actually this mechanism here. This part is made out of metal. So what I did is I took that part, and this kit here comes with this tool here, and that tool has a point at the end. So what I did is I drilled a hole. I put that piece that comes here, which is this one, I put it in there, and what I did is I just tack welded it around, and then I sanded this down smooth so that it gave me that smooth surface there. I hope y'all can see that. So let me go ahead and actually take out the pieces that we're gonna need. We're actually gonna need this connector right here that connects this piece, and we're gonna need our slide hammer. Okay, so let's put that off to the side. So now we have this piece. Now this piece here, before we put it on, this is the part that's gonna go into our carburetor to the stuck slide that is in there. Now, there is a jet in here that sticks out and it won't go in here. So, unfortunately, what we're gonna have to do to that jet is try to pull it out. And usually when we try to pull it out, it just comes out like that. And that's fine. We don't need the jet. That jet is actually meant to come out in that manner. So we're gonna put our tool in here now. We're gonna line it up with our holes. And of course, one of the things I wanna point out is this tool, hopefully y'all can see it, but this tool, you don't need to necessarily have one of these, like an extra one of these laying around. You can actually make this out of metal and then weld it on here as long as you have the two small holes in the correct place where these are. So you can potentially make one of these yourself without having to have another set of slides. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in here, I'm gonna put it in the correct orientation, and then I'm gonna add the bolts that go there on the slide. I'm gonna just look in here. Okay, yeah, we got it in the hole. We're gonna tighten that up. As soon as you feel like it tightens up, back away, and then add your second one. So I'm pretty sure you guys get the idea now what's gonna happen, but we're gonna put these two bolts in there, which are gonna attach to our slide that's stuck in there. Now you wanna tighten up these bolts. Try not to tighten them up too much, but you wanna get them snug in there because you wanna be able to take them out. Now we put in our adapter here. As you can see, we have our adapter. Now we put our slide hammer into our slide, thread it on there. Okay. Okay, and then all you have to do is just hit it slowly. As you can see, piece of cake. That's how you remove a stuck slide from a set of carbs from a CB550, 500, and that series of carbs. Now you can use the same principle for other carbs. As you can see, the slide came out, no damage to the slide. You can use the same principle with other carbs. You just have to make sure that you can create the tool or sacrifice a slide from another carb set to be able to do that. Now I work on CB550s. I've worked on them quite a bit, so I have extra slides. But in your case, if you don't have it, just try to make something out of metal and remove them in that way. If you find yourself using a screwdriver to pry on these slides, chances are you're gonna damage them and they're not gonna come out. So there you go. That's how you remove a slide from a set of carbs. Now all we have to do is come back, put that aside, and start working on our float bowls. Now that we've disassembled our carburetors, now it's time to put them into our parts washer. Now I'm using an ultrasonic cleaner because I have one and it makes the job a lot easier. Now you don't have to do that. You can use carburetor cleaner, some of that spray cleaner that you have, you can do that. You don't necessarily have to have this. Now you do want to ensure that all the passages, the air passages and the fuel passages in your carburetors, they all get cleaned out properly. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put them in our small ultrasonic cleaner basket. We're gonna put them in here. As you can see, they don't have the float bowls, so they can fit in here all together. And what I'm gonna use is Pine Sol. Now, a lot of people don't like Pine Sol. I love Pine Sol because it actually cleans the carburetors fairly well. Now, I'm not gonna add a lot of it. This is a 20 floor ounce bottle, and I'm gonna add it to my parts cleaner here, which is my, I believe this is 6 liters. I'm gonna add it to my parts cleaner here. You're gonna make sure that the valve is closed first. So like I said, this is 20 floor ounces of Pine Sol. We're gonna add that to our ultrasonic cleaner. We're gonna first insert our carbs, and then we're gonna fill the rest with just regular tap water. All right, 1 gallon of water plus 20 millimeters or 24 ounces of Pine Sol get us up to the top. We're just gonna wiggle the carburetors around, try to get them all in place so that we can turn on the ultrasonic cleaner and make sure that they're all submerged so that we can wash them properly. So we're gonna put the lid on. I like to set my ultrasonic cleaner for 30 minutes and a temperature of 75 here. I think this is degrees Celsius. So because it does have Pine Sol, a lot of the parts I'm gonna have to wash separately, but because it does have Pine Sol, I'm gonna add a little bit of blue tape around here on the lid because, you know, after it starts washing and it starts heating up, you can really get a lot of the fumes in your garage. And even though Pine Sol smells good, it can be a little overwhelming. So you might want to just be able to cap that off. You might want to try Pine Sol just with a brush if you have to. It's something that you might have laying around at home, but I feel like it does wonders on carburetors because it doesn't, it's not as corrosive. You can trust it with aluminum and it cleans aluminum very well. One of the things I will say is that I do have a parts rinser, which is something that I made. I like to use that. It's a simple pump, water pump that I put in there. And what I do is when I take out my carburetors, I immediately dump them in there because you don't want to leave them in the chemical too long because that's when your parts can start to get a little bit, you know, tarnished and stuff like that. So you want to rinse off the Pine Sol right away. And instead of being there trying to rinse it off, I like to turn on the pump, put them in there, and get them rinsed off. So I'll show you how that works when we start the process. So for now, let's start cleaning our carburetors. Okay, so this is my parts rinser. Now it's a simple container, clear container, and I put an aquarium pump in it. This is a cheap pump that you can get from like Amazon for like 12, maybe 15 bucks. But I put a piece of pipe with some holes drilled to it. So whenever I finish cleaning some parts with my solution, what I do is I plug in my pump and I leave my parts rinsing in here for just a couple of minutes. As you can see, the flow of the water kind of circles everything around and it gets, you know, as you can see, it kind of has a little bit of foam in it. That's because of the chemical that's in the carbs. I leave them in there for a little bit just to kind of get everything kind of cleaned out. It's kind of making that noise because the water level, I'll show you here, the water level is kind of low. So it kind of sucks up a little bit of air through here. And that kind of agitates the water inside of the container, parts container. But as you can see, it's doing a great job cleaning the carbs. Again, this is not a necessary step. You can do without this process, but I like to do it because it saves me time. Now I can go back to the ultrasonic cleaner and I can start, you know, cleaning all the rest of the parts, like the bowls and you know, all the other parts that we need to clean for the carbs. So I'm gonna leave this in here, and I'm gonna go back to the parts cleaner and get the rest of the stuff washed. And our next step is going to be to place all the washed parts on our bench so we can start the reassembly of our carburetors. So now that we washed our parts, one of the steps that I like to take to ensure that all of these parts don't get any flash rust on them is to apply some WD-40 to my carburetor parts. This is gonna ensure that all of those metal components are gonna stay nice and lubricated, and when we go back to reassembly, we're gonna have an easy time when it comes to that. Now, I like to use WD-40 for this part, but I definitely like to use Blaster for the actual disassembly portion of the carbs like you saw earlier today. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna also use some 1500 grit sandpaper to sand a lot of these components down to ensure that they are nice and clean and they're presentable so that we can go back to reassembly. Now, I like to get our carbs looking, you know, as nice as possible. You don't need a vapor hone. You don't need some of those fancy tools to clean these carbs. All you have to do is put a little bit of elbow grease into this part to get them looking really nice. Get some brushes, go into all those you know, areas that need cleaning and kind of get in there and do that so that when we go back to reassembly, everything is gonna be nice and clean and we're gonna have a great time doing that. Now, one of the things I did want to mention is that I used something to clean all these rusty bolts, and that was white vinegar. Now, I used white vinegar and I put all these bolts that were rusted. I'm sure you remember how some of these bolts were rusted. I'll give you a close-up here, but they went from really rusty to looking great. And that white vinegar, what I did is I placed all the bolts in white vinegar in a small container that had white vinegar, and then I placed it inside of my ultrasonic, which had some water in it. So that got rid of all the rust, and as you can see, now our bolts are looking really well. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get these carbs as clean as possible, make sure I go through all of them, and then from there, we'll go back to our bench, and then we'll start on reassembly of these carburetors. All right, so we're getting ready to put our carbs back together, but we want to make sure that we understand the orientation or how these are placed in the carb stack together. Now, some of these are directional, so they have a specific place to go. So I wanted to take some time to just show you how they go. So the first thing I want to do is I want to locate the choke lever. That is this choke lever that is right here. Now, like we mentioned earlier, this choke lever goes off to the left side of the bike. If you're riding on it, it goes on the left side. So we want to make sure that we place that all the way to the left. So we're going to place that right here for now. So we know that this is where that carb goes. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to check and see here. This is a breather tube that we see there. So that breather tube needs to connect to another carburetor. So if we look at the rest of the carburetors that we have here, this one has a breather tube that goes up, so we know that goes somewhere in the middle. And this one has a breather tube that goes up as well. And then the other one doesn't have a breather tube on this side. So we know that this is actually an outer carburetor, so we can place that one towards the end. So we know that that one goes towards the end of the stack. And now we have these two to deal with. Originally, when we took them apart, we noticed that these little breather tubes actually go together. So we need to figure out which one now attaches to our first, our carb that has the choke lever, and that is this one right here. So we know that that one is gonna go there because these little tubes are gonna connect together. And then these breather tubes that go to our hoses have to be in the same orientation together. So now we place them closer to our camera here. Now we can see that they go in this orientation. So we have our choke lever here, we have our connection for our breather tube here, then we have the connection for the breather tube that goes to the bottom of the bike, same thing here, and then we have a connection here and nothing on the last carburetor here. So that's the orientation. Now, another thing that is specific to the orientation is the float bowls. So if you look at the float bowls, this is what we have here, and this is where the bolt that attaches to the drain goes. Now, if we put our carburetors together, we don't want our drain to end up facing inwards. because then we're not gonna have access to that drain bolt. So we wanna make sure that as we're placing them, that we understand that they go like this, and that orientation has to be facing outwards. So in this case, this one is correct. Now we lift this one and we check this one. Now notice on this one, the bolt that goes in here is actually going to be facing inwards. So we don't want that. So we need to look for another one that is going to fit here. So we put this one here, it's going to be facing inwards. That one's not the right one. So now we look for the one that is going to be facing outwards, and we found it. Okay, so now we have two right here that are going to be facing outwards, and now we have to look for the rest. So obviously these two right here are going to go in place here. The nut is going to be facing outwards to the side of the bike. That's how that's going to go. And then the last one is going to go there. Another thing that's directional on these carburetors is the slide. Now, if you notice here, I'm going to tilt these forward, and hopefully y'all can see if they stay put. Now these carburetors, if you look inside, they have a little piece of metal that will allow you to slide this slide into them. So I'm just for the sake of demonstration, I'm gonna put these slides in there, and I'm gonna make sure that they slide in there. I'm gonna take the other one. This one is missing the needle, but we're still gonna replace all of that once we go to reassembly. See, this one goes in here, perfect there. And then this one, we can put it in here. And then the same thing. So all of these carbs have that little piece of metal off to the right. So we know that this slot here, this one is actually gonna go in there. All right, so we have them all in and they all fit. However, if you notice, this one, the orientation of this one is actually wrong, because this one won't be able to work. The slide is correct as far as where it goes here, like the slot, but this one needs to be turned the other way around. So in order to do that, we have to go in there and we have to fix this one so that the mechanism can actually sit like this. Now, the only way to do that is to remove the slide from in there and fix this one. As you recall, this one is the one we took apart because it was a stuck slide. So we don't want to do that mistake. We want to make sure that we get it correctly. Now, the other ones that we haven't taken apart, notice how they all fit, and notice how the mechanism or the arm sits here together, and it sits fine there. But notice how this arm, I hope you can see that, is off to the left and this one is off to the right. Now, in this situation here, our arm is going to go, this little ball bearing arm is going to go on this side. So it's gonna go into there. Now, we wanna make sure that we have the right orientation, because when it goes into actually putting everything together, we wanna make sure that the arms are correctly oriented. Now, the same thing goes for the other arm. It has to be on the other side of the mechanism. So I hope y'all can see this, but they won't both go together. They will go one on this side and one on this side, because our arms are gonna be in the middle. So always remember that. They go on the opposite side. If we put this one in here, see, that doesn't make sense. So if I turn the slide the other way, then I'll end up with the mechanism like this. And as you can see, the arms are on the right and this one is off to the other side. So that's the way it's supposed to go. There's really not much science to it. You can get it correctly, but if you run into this issue, then you know that you placed your mechanism into your slide incorrectly. Hope you all can see that. So don't do this. I wanted to show you. Make sure that you put it in correctly, the right way, so that your mechanism will actually work the way it's supposed to and will go into the bore correctly. In this case, this one is wrong. So let's take them apart. what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm going to take one carburetor and I'm gonna show you how to rebuild the carburetor by putting new jets and putting, you know, all the components that we got in our small kit here. In our kit, I'm gonna put everything together in one carburetor. You're gonna be able to repeat the same process for all of these carburetors. And then I'll come back and I'll show you how we go about putting all the carburetors back together. All right, so we're getting ready to rebuild our carburetor. But before we do that, I have all my carburetors kind of in the order that we mentioned earlier. But before we do that, I want to show you these carburetor rebuild kits. Now, these kits, there's different quality of kits, I guess you can say. This kit I bought for about $30 off of Amazon. I've never gotten this kit before, but I figured I'd give it a try for this video. It comes with our needle here, the main jet needle. It also comes with our needle and seat here, our pilot jet, comes with our emulsion tube here, and then it comes with the main jet. And then it also comes with the air mixture screw and of course the needle for the seat. It also comes with our float here. It comes with our gasket for the top of our slide. It comes with the gasket that is shaped to the size and the shape of our bowl. And then it also comes with all these little things here. Now these are gaskets. Some quality kits actually come with what you might call, you know, a pre-installed gaskets or pre-installed seals. So as you notice, some of these jets here, they don't have the seals installed. So we're gonna have to install that, but that's not a big deal. It does come with these tiny little kind of gaskets here. So you do have to kind of figure out which one is which. These bigger ones here are for your fuel line. And you have two medium-sized ones right here. And then you have two small ones and, you know, different sizes. You have your little clip for your main jet, and then you have your slide for the float. So the first thing we want to do, some of these we were not going to use. We don't need to use them. This kit might include them for other bikes, or it might just have extras for other portions of the carb rebuild kit that we're not going to use. So our first one that we want to install is we want to install the one on our needle and seat. Now there's a thick one here. This one is actually for our the screw for our float float bowls. That's the drain screw one. But then you have these two medium-sized gaskets. So one is a little thicker than the other one. So I found that the thicker one is the one that goes on this main jet, or on this float needle seat. So we're gonna install that one here. Gotta be very careful. All right, I'm sorry about that. I misspoke previously. It's actually this one that goes on the float needle and seat. So I think we got that one. We can always go back and check, double check, make sure that it's the right gasket. So we'll just leave that for now. Now the main jet has two grooves. The top groove with the thicker side here, that one we're not gonna install anything on there. We're gonna install a seal on the bottom one only. So the seal that we're gonna install is this one right here. We're just gonna gently put it over. You can add a little bit of lubricant. I add lubricant when I'm about to put them into the carbs, but that's it. Now, we don't need to install any other gaskets on any of these other components here. So as we rebuild the carb, we'll start installing them here in the future. So let me go ahead and bring the carb out so I can start working on it. We'll put these off to the side. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to check this arm that we have here. Now this arm has to go facing inwards here, but the first thing that we need to replace, which I didn't replace before, was the needle for the main jet. Now this needle here, we need to remove it by removing these two bolts that it has here. So you want to grab a GS screwdriver, remove these 2 screws that it has in here. All you have to do is look for them in there, remove them. They're kind of long, so be patient. Okay, so before we remove them, I just want to point something out. I want you to really focus on the orientation of the arm. Some of these might be different. They might be on the opposite end. So you want to put them just how you took them out. That's how you want to put it back into the arm. So if you notice this groove is away from the arm. So you want to make sure that if you are taking this out, you put it back exactly how it is. So we just have to remember that when we see this groove, the arm is on the opposite side. So once we remove the bolts, it should be coming out. Okay, they're out. This one is out. We'll remove the other one, and then we'll dump them here on the table. Okay, so remember, they're in this orientation. So what you want to do is you want to give it a half turn, and then you're going to be able to remove it. There we go. It was a half turn the other way. This one has a little bit of rust. We'll clean it up. Okay, so now you have your needle in there, your main jet needle, and all you want to do is just push it out this way. Once you push it out, you're going to see where this little clip is in orientation, as far as where, because it has about 4 slots in here. So this one is on the second slot from the bottom of the needle to the top. It's in the second slot. So on our new needle from our kit, we want to put this clip in the second slot as well. We don't want to move it. We want to make sure that it's in the second slot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it in the second slot, make sure it's in the second one, and then put it on one of my screwdrivers, and then just gently work it in. You're going to have to clip it in there. Okay, it might take some doing. So we want to try to position that. Okay, and just kind of push it down, insert it. There we go. Make sure that's nice and seated. Okay, so now that we installed the little clip on the second from the bottom little slot there, we want to put it back into our slide. To put it back, all we have to do is put it in the middle and then just slide it in. Okay, so our slide is in. As you can see there, it was quite a tight, it was kind of a tight fit, to be honest. I'm not sure I've ever experienced that with needles, but it was kind of a tight fit, but that's all right. We'll try this kit out and see how that works. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to place our slide. We're going to slide it in. There's a little groove here. We're going to slide that in, and then we're going to twist it and line up the bolts. But like you remember, we said that the arm was supposed to be on the other side of this slot here. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we turn it the other way till the holes align for our bolts, and then we'll go back in there and we'll put our bolts in. Now you don't want to tighten the one on the other side too much. You want to wait till you tighten both evenly. So now we have both here. We're tightening them up evenly. Get them snug first. Once you have them snug, then you can kind of tighten them up. Not too much, just kind of make sure they're not going to back out, obviously. Okay, so now we have our needle installed, and our next step is going to get our carb, and we have our carb here. We're gonna install our emulsion tube, which is this one right here. We're gonna install it. So the way to install it is we're going to place the part that's a little bit longer, I guess you can say, or thicker on this side, where that's the part that's going to go into our bore first, and then this smaller part is going to be the one that sticks out to this side. It has little holes here. I don't think it matters, but I like to place the holes facing this side and then the other one's facing the other way in that orientation like that. So we're just going to place it in there, drop it in there, and we're good to go. So we want to just kind of make sure it kind of goes in there. Don't force it in there. Just try to get something to kind of push it in place. It usually stays by itself there. It doesn't need a lot of persuasion or anything like that. But as you can see, now we have it in there. Now our needle is going to go in there. That's why we want to make sure we have that emulsion tube on first. If you look in here in this bore, you're going to feel a piece of metal on one of the sides of the bore. That piece of metal is going to go where this slot goes. So you know that your needle is going to go and your slide is going to go facing this way like that. So you're going to place it in there, wiggle it a little bit. If you need to add some penetrating oil, you can add a little bit of oil here just to kind of keep everything nice and lubricated. You can also use oil to keep things lubricated, and then just add your slide and make sure your slide goes down like that. Okay, so now it's time to add our arm. Now our arm goes here and it slides in through this slot here, but we also need to put all the pieces that came with the arm. So I'm gonna grab those. Okay, so our first piece that goes in the arm is this washer that kind of holds this spring in place. And then after that, we have our metal washer. And then after that, we have this plastic washer. And then at the very end of this, we have our felt washer, which is this one right here. So we're gonna carefully put it in there. This one is very delicate, so just be very careful when installing that felt washer. That one is just kind of so things don't kind of rub up against the metal. And then finally we have this plastic washer that goes inside. So once you put it in here, you're gonna have to kind of wiggle this in there. Now there is a rounded off side and then there's a flat side. I like to keep the flat side towards the carb and then the round, kind of side towards the arm, because I feel like this arm is softer in that sense. But we're gonna slide it in here. We're gonna push it in a little bit. We're gonna put our arm and then try to wiggle that together. Make sure it goes in place. Okay, once it starts sliding in there, you're gonna notice that all of these components are gonna compress. Just like that. Now, if you look in here, we need to ensure that our ball bearing, or this little ball here on the arm, is not facing backwards like this, because you can line up the holes in here, you can line them up, but it's going to be facing backwards. You don't want that. You want them to be facing inwards like that. So once you line up the hole, then all we have to do is find our bolt that went here and install it. This is a 7mm, I believe. You're gonna screw it in there, just get it in there, make sure the arm is free. Okay, you're gonna get that in there. Notice that this washer here, there's a flat side to it, and then there's a part that you kind of bend. Now this flat side is supposed to go in this groove here so that it doesn't move as you're tightening up the bolt. So I'm just gonna back it up a little bit and try to get that washer to the right side. Okay, so it's supposed to be like that. Tighten up the bolt, come in with our 7mm socket, and we're just gonna tighten it up. You don't have to tighten it up too much, just get it snug on there. Once you do that, then we'll come back and we'll just try to bend this piece of metal back. Just be careful doing this. All it does is just it keeps the screw from coming loose. Okay, so now we have it. As you can see, make sure that the slide is going up and down smoothly. Now what we need to do is install our little gasket here. This gasket goes here, and then we have our piece for our carburetor that goes on top, and then we just need to grab our screws. Now, I'm not sure if you recall, but I cleaned these screws and they came out really nice. I cleaned them with some white vinegar. I placed them in a container since they had rust. I placed them in a container with white vinegar and I put it in my ultrasonic and then just left them sitting overnight. And almost all of the rust came off of these bolts. So I'm very happy with the results. So go ahead and tighten them up with your GIS screwdriver. Okay, get them snug. Okay, there we go. So we're done with that part. Now we can move over to the bottom portion of this. So now that we have our emulsion tube in there, now we need to install our needle and seat right here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're gonna grab our seat right here, and that goes into that hole right there. I'm gonna add a little bit of lubricating oil just to kind of help the seal kind of go down to the place where it's supposed to go. Yeah, it looks a lot better. Okay, so now we go back and we look for our screw that goes here. We're gonna put in our screw right here that holds that seat in place. Come back with our GIS screwdriver and then tighten it up. Perfect. Okay, we got the seal nice and seating there perfectly. Okay, so the next easiest thing to do is to install our, we're just gonna go to the side real quick, to install our idle air mixture screw. This idle air mixture screw goes here on the side. All you have to do is put it in and then just screw it in. Now, this one, you want to screw it in all the way. Once you feel it kind of bottoming out, then you're gonna back it out 1 turn and a half, which is right there. So that's it. We've installed that one. Easy. Okay, so our next step is to install our pilot jet. This pilot jet here, it doesn't have any gaskets or anything like that. This one goes right here. All we have to do is just screw it in. I like to use my small GIS screwdriver. That one fits perfectly in there. And then when you get it close enough, you're gonna feel some resistance. Just tighten it up a little bit more and that's it. You don't wanna over tighten this one because the screws, the threads on this screw is they're very fine and you run the risk of stripping that screw. Okay. So we've installed that. Now we're gonna install our float bowls, I think. Yeah, our floats. We're gonna install our floats. So we're gonna put our needle. This is the one for the float bowl, so we're gonna put it in here. The squishy side or the spring side, this one has a spring side here. I'm gonna put that one facing upwards. Put it in there. And then we're gonna put our floats. Now our floats have a longer side and a shorter side. The longer side is the one that faces down, or in this case it would be up. But all you have to do is just put it in place and then take your slide and then work your slide into the hole and make sure it slides in through here. Now notice this kit comes with metal, a metal slide. Some come with brass. I'm not too sure. Sometimes I prefer the metal over the brass, but I don't know if there's any difference. Okay, so we got that in place. Now what we need to do is we need to install our main jet. But before we do that, we want to measure the height of our floats. Now the height from here to here needs to be about 22 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my micrometer, I'm going to measure from here to here, and I'm going to make sure that that's 22 millimeters. You don't necessarily need a micrometer, but it's a good idea to have one. So we're just gonna move this to 22 millimeters. Okay, we're gonna tighten this up. And now I'm able to check the height. So this one needs to come down quite a bit. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to insert a screwdriver right here, and I'm going to pry this little tab up. Now you can do it in the carb, but you can run the risk of damaging it. So what I like to do, or damaging the needle, so what I like to do is I just like to do it outside. That way I can take my screwdriver, you can take some pliers as well, and try to just see it's a soft piece of metal, so you're gonna have to just adjust it back and forth. I went ahead and adjusted it a little bit, and now we can, when you feel it kind of touching the needle, that's where you're at. Now we want to come back and measure, and we're still pretty high, so we need to lower it a little bit more. I'm gonna try to do it here. Okay, see where we're at there. Still need a little bit more. Okay, almost there. Just need a little bit more. Take your time with this. You don't want to break your floats. You know, just kind of take your time. Almost. Just a little bit more. There we go. I think that's what we need. Yep. So we got from the center of the floats to the bottom of the base here, we got 22 millimeters, and now our floats are set. Now we got to install our main jet, but before I do that, I just kind of want to explain to you guys how this carburetor kind of works. And the reason for that is because, well, you really need to understand how it works in order for you to know if your bike is ever, you know, misfiring or there's issues with it. So I want to kind of explain to you how it works. So if you notice, I'm opening this choke. All the choke does is it closes off the air going into your bike so that more fuel can go into your bike, so that you can have an easier time starting it up. Now this choke here, it works off of the first one, off of the first carb, which has like a little tab where it kind of sticks together so that way it can stay open like that. Once it stays open like that, as you can see, maybe see inside, then we have our slide that kind of goes up and down. The slide, most of the time the bike will have the carb or the chokes open like this, and what controls the air going in is your slide. As you rev it up, it's going to move up and it's going to let more air into this area, and it's gonna inject more air into your engine. And of course, since the needle goes up and it gets thinner, then the main jet is gonna let more gas go into this chamber or to this area here, and it's gonna push it into your engine. Now, that's under when you're revving your engine, when you're trying to go faster, that's what it does. But when you're at idle, this is when your slide is just like this. And we need to kind of adjusted here at the very end, but that's when your slide is at this point like this. Now, the only thing, and of course your choke is gonna be open like that. The only thing that is affecting at that point the gas and the air are your pilot jet here and your air mixture screw right here. So this pilot is letting in a certain amount of gas into, it's gonna let gas go in here, and it's gonna let gas kind of squirt into your engine at a certain rate, because based on this jet size. So what that does is that it then keeps your engine idling. And of course, this other screw here, it measures how much air you're letting into the engine when you're in accordance with your pilot jet. So these two actually keep your bike running. So when if you're having issues with your bike and your bike is not idling, you don't want to be looking at the needle and your slide there, or paying attention to those things, or even your main jet. You don't want to be looking at that. You want to be looking at these passages here, your pilot jet and your idle mixture screw. That's what's going to tell you if there's any issues. Now, if your bike is only staying on when you're revving it, that means that you're letting gas in through your main jet, and that's what's keeping your bike on. But when you let go, it's gonna close your air, and it's gonna close your gas. And what's gonna happen, it's gonna rely on this pilot jet to insert gas. And if your engine or your bike bogs down and it turns off, chances are that you have a stuck, or a dirty pilot jet, or there's a problem with your air mixture screw. So just to keep that in mind, that's usually what happens. Another thing that could happen, and the reason why we adjust these bowls or these floats in the bowl, is because all the floats do is it regulates how much gas goes into your bowls, right? So when the floats are empty, the floats open this needle, it lets gas in to your bowl here, and then the gas level, for example, the gas level will come up, and it'll come up to a certain point, and it'll shut off, right? So it won't let any more gas in. As your bike uses gas, it goes down, the level goes down, and then the floats let more gas in, and then it goes back up. And then it comes down, and it goes back up. That's how it is all the time. But you wanna make sure you keep your levels above the pilot jet and above your main jet. You wanna make sure that the gas level is up here. If your floats are adjusted wrong, it could be that your floats are cutting off the gas right here. So what does that do? It's not gonna let any gas touch this pilot jet or your main jet, and it's not going to suck up any gas. So you wanna make sure that your float level is adjusted properly so that it goes all the way to the top. Now keep in mind, if you're doing a lot of riding and you have your bike tilting, that level you want to have that level pretty high, so that as you're tilting your bike to the side, it stays submerged. Those jets stay submerged in your gas. Now, in order to let gas into your chamber here, into your flow bowl, you need to be able to have a breather, which is this one. Now notice how this one is attached to that little hole right there. If you have this passage restricted, then what's gonna happen is if you try to let gas go into this chamber here, but the only way that it's gonna go in here is to, because you're trying to put gas in there, the only way that it's going to let gas go in there is if it has a way to release the air that's trapped in here so that the float bowl can fill up with gas. Now, if this little tube here is clogged, then what's gonna happen is if you have it clogged, the air it's not going to let fuel go into your bowl because there's air trapped in there. So what's gonna happen is now you're gonna have gas that's wanting to go up or wanting to fill this bowl. And then like we mentioned before, it's gonna want to fill the bowl, but if there's no way for the air to escape, it's gonna stop right there. So that could be an issue. A lot of people don't focus on this, but having a breather that's not clogged or anything is very important. So make sure that that's not clogged so your float bowls can fill up. So I hope that kind of helps some of y'all out there. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with carbs, but understanding how a carb works will help you kind of making sure you diagnose your problems whenever they arise properly. Our last step is to install our main jet. It's gonna go in this orientation. We just have to ensure that it seals properly. And then we install our metal clip that is gonna be held down by our float bowls. So now that we have all the components in our carb ready, now we can go into installing our float bowl. As you can see, this is the gasket that is shaped like the float bowl here, or the carburetor bowl. But as you can see, the gasket doesn't quite fit properly. So to kind of remedy that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to spray a little bit of spray adhesive on this and see if I can get that to stick, to get tacky, just so we can kind of hold it in place. So I sprayed some spray adhesive in here. Now, as you can see, it's starting to get kind of tacky. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna bring in my gasket and start sticking it in there. Okay, now we can go quickly and put it onto our carb. There we go. Now we install our screws. Now, I don't like to use this method because, you know, it's really, you shouldn't have to do this to hold the gasket down just because the gasket is not of good quality. But sometimes, I mean, things just work out like that. So the last thing to do is just to install our drain plug here. It has a little small gasket that you install there. Gonna install it here. We're gonna use our long screwdriver, install it there. All right, and there we have it. That's our finished product. That's one carburetor complete. Now we can move on to the rest. The rest of the carburetors are all gonna be the same, so I'm not gonna film it. It's the same process, installing the needle with the slide, the arm, and then installing all the components in here. And after you do that, just put your drain plug here and you're on to the next one. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that to all of the carbs, and then we'll come back and then I'll show you how to reassemble everything back into our carburetor stack. All right, so we reached the final point in our carb rebuild process, and we have all the carbs on our bench. All we have to do now is put them back together into the carburetor stack. I have some pre-cut fuel line here. Now I wanted to show you, this is the T that goes in between the carbs. Now, the size of this is actually a 1/4 inch inside diameter. I know some people are gonna disagree with this. I don't like to use a 1/4 inch diameter. I'll show you here. I have a hose here that's fuel line, that's a 1/4 inch diameter. This is supposed to fit on there better, and it does, but then you have a hose that's very rigid and doesn't really have a lot of flex to it. And obviously, if you get the original Honda hose, it's 1/4 inch inside diameter, I believe, but then it's real thin. So, I mean, you could go that route, but what I like to do is I get 3/16 line, fuel line rated, right? I get that one, and I just squeeze it into this fitting. As you can see, it doesn't take much. I just put a little bit of lubricating oil in there, or lubricating fluid, and it slides right in there. These gaskets right here, I just replaced. They come in the kit, or these seals, and that's it. Now what I also like to do, since we can't really get one of those hose clamps, like the ones you screw into this area, what I like to do is I like to add a piece of wire, twist it together, and then bend it down and make sure that that is in a position where it's not going to hit anything, but it'll make sure that the line doesn't come out. If you ask me, you can see it's not really bulging or anything from here. It looks clean, and yeah, the line is very flexible, so we can run it around in the bike. So what I do is I just cut 2 of these and I get them ready for installation. So what I want to do is I want to make sure my carbs are all complete, they're all done. One of the things I want to do first is I want to figure out how I'm going to join these. Now, I cut these 1-inch piece of a hose. These are breather tube, really. They're fuel line, but I'm going to use them as the breather tubes, and they're going to go in between here. Now, you don't have to clamp these, but just make sure you have the right size. These are actually 3/16 size, so we're good there. Now, we want to install our fuel line. Let's just put a little bit of lubricant in here, just to kind of make sure that it goes in there. Now, this little clamp, we want to make sure that we have it facing up on our fuel line. The fuel line is going to go right here. Now remember that in our bracket, the fuel line is going to run through here. So we just got to keep that in mind. So that's how our bracket is going to sit, just like this. So we're going to put that one in there. We're going to put this one in here, and then we're going to squeeze these together. Hopefully we got the right size for that line. Okay, there we go. All right, perfect. Okay, so we got those 2 together. We installed the breather hose in here. That one just kind of has to go in the middle. It's a little short, but that'll do. Just move that one to the middle. That's fine. Let me just scoot it over a little bit. There we go. Perfect. Okay, now notice how these chokes, they have to align here, so that way when you open one, the other one opens. All right, so you want to do that. Okay, so let's just leave that there for now, and we'll move on to the next one. So we have these 2 here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to install our little piece of hose in the middle. We're going to bring our T over here, add a little bit of lubricant just so that the seals can run through there fairly well. We're going to put them in here just like that. And then we're going to join these 2 together. Notice how the inlet of the fuel from these 2 lines, they have holes in them. So if you don't see a hole inside of this little crevice here, then you're doing it wrong. So just make sure that there's a hole there. All right, so we're gonna slide this into place, making sure that our chokes are lining up. Okay, perfect. All right, so the next thing that I wanna do is I wanna start kind of putting it into our bracket here. Now we don't wanna tighten everything up. We just kind of wanna set it in place a little bit just to kind of start joining everything together. So I'm gonna move these aside here, this way. And I'm gonna bring this bracket. Remember to put the fuel line in through the bracket. Now the fuel line is extra long because I don't know how it's gonna be routed in the bike once we put it in there, so I wanna make sure I have some flexibility to route everything. All right, so we're going to start to align our bracket. Okay. start to align everything in here. There we go. Now, I have to put in the screws here, but we still have to work on all these mechanisms, but I'm still going to just add one screw here on the side, and I think that'll help me kind of align everything. I don't want to tighten it up, but I do want to put it in enough so that the carb stacks will stay in place. Now I want to do one screw for each carb or each side so that the stack can stay in place. Now notice how there's still movement. We want that because we still need to do some adjustments, but that'll keep our carbs in place. Here we go. All right, one thing we forgot to put in was this little piece right here. Now this little piece right here is for the spring. Now let me see if I can go back and just put it in. Okay, we're just gonna spread the carbs apart just a bit to kind of get that piece in there. And I hope y'all can see it, but this little piece goes in here, and that's what holds the spring, the return spring in place. Line it up with the other car bodies, and now we can put it into the bracket. Now this is a delicate dance because we want to get the bracket to stay in there, but we also want to join all the carburetors. So make sure that you're not pinching any fuel line and get everything nice and aligned. There we go. All right, so back go the screws. There we go. Again, you don't want to tighten these up too much. Just get them snug so that they don't fall off. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have our stack in place. Gonna move these lines out of the way a little bit. All right, so now that we have our stacks kind of aligned and we have that little return spring in there, then we can start working on our mechanisms here. Now, earlier in the video, I told you that I had one that broke. There was a little piece in here, one of these little golf tees, I guess, or golf pins. One of these goes in there and it kind of sits in there permanently, and the head broke off of one of these mechanisms, or one of these little arms. And so if you don't have this, then these little ball bearings, these little balls, it won't ride properly if it doesn't have this. So you want to make sure that you have these in place, because these little balls depend on riding like that. So I had an extra one, so I went ahead and used it. So here it is. This is the one that I'm going to use. So let's start by figuring out which one is the one that goes here. So these top arms here are not really, I hope you can see this, but these top arms are not really adjustable. So they have a spring in there, but then you just put a cap and that's it. The one that's adjustable is this one right here. So this is the adjustable side. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to set a spring in there. That's where our spring goes. And then we have one of these golf pins that go in there, and you're gonna see it like this, okay? And so this one will attach to the inside part of this. Now I want to show you, the original carbs come with a little plastic piece like this. This is a wrong side. The original carbs come with a little plastic piece that goes like this. It's kind of meant to keep dust and debris from going into these surfaces. into these areas where the ball or the ball joint goes. And it's cool because as you adjust it, it kind of squishes in place and it adjusts accordingly as you move the arm up and down as you sink your carbs. That's why it has this little groove here. However, these become very brittle and you're not able to reuse these. So technically, if you keep your bike clean, you don't have to worry too much about this. But I would say if you're able to get these somehow, I would put it on the carbs. Okay. So now that we have our spring in there and we have our little golf tee, now we can come to our carbs and try to put it into our arm here. Now, in order to do this, we're gonna kind of have to go in there and kind of squeeze it into place. As you can see, we got it into place. Now, the other side of the arm, this other side of the arm already has a pin in there. So we don't have to worry about that one, but we do have to worry about the little pin that goes on the other side, which is this one right here. It goes that one, and then we have a spring, and then we have this cap that goes here. It goes like that. Okay, so we're gonna just kind of tighten it up a little bit. I put some grease, by the way, inside of these. I don't know if you can see it, but I put a little bit of grease just to kind of keep everything lubricated. Okay, so we have this arm in place. We're not going to install this adjustment screw because this is the one that goes on the other side of this one. We're not gonna install those yet. We're gonna install the arm that goes on the other side. So we have to include a spring in this one first, and then one of these little golf tees, and then we can come in here and kind of wiggle it in here and try to put that arm, make sure that that arm will fit there. Okay, once we get it into place, then we can try to move the carbs around, try to get that arm in place. Perfect. Now we need a spring, put a spring in here. I'm sorry, put a pin, put a pin in here, and put a spring, and then our cap. Okay, so we have that mechanism in place now. This portion of the mechanism is not installed yet, so we're gonna leave that for the end. Now we're gonna do the same thing to this side. We're gonna find our mechanism or a little arm like this. We're gonna install a spring in there. We're gonna find our golf tee. We're gonna throw it in there, and then we're going to install it onto the carburetor arm here. Now there's an arm, there's two arms, but you really have to move this one down and then slip this one in here and really kind of find that. Let me see, I think I might be putting the wrong one in. Yep, okay, sorry about that. It was supposed to be this one. So let's just change the spring. Let's just change the spring to this one. Put in the spring in there. We'll put in our golf tee like that. And then we'll try to get it in here. Find our slide. Try to get it into our slide. And you'll hear it kind of go in. So the spring has to compress, the golf tee has to compress in, and then the little ball joint will go in there. All right, we got it in there. So now we're going to put our golf tee into this one, our spring in there, and then our cap. Perfect. All right, so then we repeat the same process for the last one. We include our spring in here, our golf tee, and that's it. So this one is going to be the other way around. So we're gonna try to get this mechanism in here. Hopefully y'all can see that. Wait till if you pull it up, you're gonna feel the spring and the T kind of holding that ball joint. You'll be able to see the bearing through the top, or that little ball. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to attach it to the other side of this linkage. Put the arm in here. It might be a little tough. Let's try to move it around. Now, if you see that the carbs you're having a hard time putting it in there, try to move the carbs around, or if you have to remove the bolt, which I think that's what I'm gonna have to do, remove the bolt from the carb over here. You might not have to remove it too much, just enough so that this mechanism can slide through. There we go. All right, perfect. And then I'll tighten it back up, just to keep everything in place. All right, so now we have that mechanism. Now we need to add another little golf tee here. First, the spring, and then our cap for this one. Perfect. All right, so now we have our carbs together. Last thing we want to do is we want to install our connectors here, or our little tee. These are also like golf tees, but they come in a different shape because these are the adjustment screws. Now you want to put them in together. Just check the orientation that you're putting them in. These have like a little groove. You want to give the arms that space that little groove has, so you want to put them in this orientation. Okay, once you put them inside, you're going to take a small screwdriver and you're going to screw them in. Now keep in mind, right now we're going to come back and adjust these, so don't screw them in all the way. Just kind of get them, in there so they don't fall out. Okay, once you feel it kind of bottoming out or kind of touching that arm, you can stop there. All right, perfect. Okay, so now everything is installed here. We have our breather line in the middle. We have our gas line running out how we want it to run. We have our connection there. We have our chokes. They're all working. They're all synced properly. Okay, so now we can check the float bowls. They're all empty into one side and empty into the other side, the screws. So now we come to this side, and then we can start adding our screws here. And this will kind of tie everything together so that the carbs will stay in place. You don't have to tighten these too much, but try to get them in there pretty snug. You want to do one pass, kind of just tighten them up a little bit. Go. Okay. So now that you have them, you can start in the middle and work your way out. Again, you don't have to go too hard on these because you have metal on aluminum surfaces. So you want to just tighten them up. Pretty good. And you're good to go. Now some people put the spring that I'm about to put in first before they finish all of this process, but I like to put it in at the very end because why not? Okay, so now we slide in our spring here in the middle where that little piece that we forgot to put it initially. We put it in here. Now that it's in there, we grab our needle nose pliers, grab it there, install it. Perfect. Okay, so now we have, damn, it's strong. So now we have our return spring in place. Okay, perfect. So now we need to open up our chokes. Now, in order to kind of get our carbs to where they need to go, we need to kind of bench sink them. And a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard the term bench sink. And the way that everybody does it is you get a 1/8 inch drill bit and you use the smooth side, not this side, the smooth side. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna kind of come here, in here, and you're gonna put it in, and you're gonna adjust your screws here, the ones that we are using to sink. You're gonna adjust those going down. So if I can show you, hopefully you can see this carb. Hopefully you can see this carb. If you tighten this screw, you'll be able to see that the slide goes down. Now we want to adjust it in a way that when we put in this screw, it's just barely gonna touch the screw. Excuse me, when we try to put it in, it's just, when we screw it in, it's just barely gonna touch our drill bit. Once we feel tension on our drill bit, then we can back it out. Okay, that's a little too much. Okay, perfect. Just a slight drag at the bottom of the slide. Okay, so we know that that's where we wanted. Now we need to come back here and tighten this nut without moving the actual screw. So that can be a little interesting. I'm gonna get a small wrench so we can do that. All right, so here we go. Okay, we're gonna check it again. Make sure it's in there, just barely, perfect. So we're gonna hold our screw in place with our screwdriver, and then we're gonna tighten up this 8mm nut. Okay, once we get it, okay, we'll tighten it up like that, and then we'll double check. Yep, perfect. Okay, so now we're gonna do the same thing for the other one. For the next one, we're going to tighten up our screw. As you can see, as we tighten up our screw, our slide goes down. We're gonna put our drill bit, our 1/8. See, in this one, we need to adjust it a little bit more. So we need to give this more play, just a little bit more play, so we can screw it down. And then it's just until we can feel it. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so now we hold the screwdriver in place and we tighten up the nut. Now, you want to just tighten it up, get it snug, and then you can come back with a socket and you can tighten these up all the way, although they don't need to be tightened up too much, but you don't want them backing out, right, I should say. Okay, so I think we got this. I'll come back with a socket and just finish tightening that up. All right, so we're gonna go on to the next one. Okay, we're gonna tighten it up. Oh, this one is almost there. Perfect. Yeah, this one is actually perfect. Okay, so we're gonna tighten this up. Okay, try it again over here. This one for sure needs adjustment. It's way too high. Now this is just to get your bike in a good starting point. You still want to sync these once they're on the bike and once the bike is up to temperature and all of that. But you at least want to get your bike running and get it to idle and all that stuff. So even though this doesn't really affect idle, but yeah, you just want to get them all kind of synced and all at the same levels. So when you hit your throttle, all the slides go up at the same time. Okay, yeah, so these are tightened up, or yeah, these are tight on there. Okay, so now there we have it. So now we have a set of carbs that we've rebuilt. These were super corroded, super bad. They needed a lot of help, but here they are, complete. Our chokes work, and this is how they look. Now all we have to do is run these to the bike and install the gas, put some gas in here, put the petcock on the gas tank, and see if we can get the bike running. As you can see, our spring is actually very tough. Let me see if I can put a screwdriver in here. It's a very strong spring. There we go. You kind of need a little bit of leverage, but you get the idea. This is how our carbs are supposed to work. They all go up and down together at the same time, and all the mechanism is working properly. Oh, one of the things I forgot to do is tighten these caps here, and that'll be our final step. Just remember, when you're tightening up these caps, you want to make sure, you want to ensure that when you're tightening these up, that you are putting a screwdriver in here to ensure that you don't damage those components. So let me go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I'm going to put my screwdriver in here and then just tighten that up. You don't want to tighten these up too much, just enough to get them snug and so that our little T in there with the spring has enough tension on it. There we go. There we go. So there you go, guys. We got our Honda CB550 carbs rebuilt. Now it's time to install them on the bike. However, I'm not going to do that in this video. That is something that we're gonna do on our next video. We're gonna try to get that bike running. I know it was a long video, but unfortunately, there's a lot of things to cover. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm gonna leave some videos here so you guys can check those out as well. And please, please, please subscribe to my channel so I can create more content like this. And I hope to see you on the next one.